Hi, everybody. Hello. How you doing?
I'm tired.
Kind of tired? Fantastic is good. Okay, well, guys, the last meeting I had here, we talked about, we were going through this list of terrorist attacks against the United States. Okay, and we had gotten to 1993, October 3rd and 4th, 1993. And this was the Black Hawk Down situation in Somalia. Okay, again, Somalia, the Horn of Africa here, right here, and Mogadishu, which is here in the south. I was just reading this morning. One of the goals of President Trump was to end kind of some of these wars and having our troops overseas and so forth. So we just pulled our last troops out of Somalia. Now, there's a group there that is linked with Al Qaeda, Bin Laden's group, called El Shabaab. Okay, and they are still a major problem in Somalia. But what started as a humanitarian mission under Herbert Walker Bush in '91, under Clinton, it changed, and they went in to try and get this leader of El Shabaab, and the Blackhawks went down, and 18 Americans were killed. Okay. And as I mentioned the other day, guys, if you haven't seen the movie Black Hawk Down, you should see it. Okay, based on a true story and excellently done. Now I'm going to be talking about Yemen here in a second, just so you know where that is, because there's an attack coming there, and then also we're going to be talking about Kenya and Tanzania down here, because there's going to be attacks on our U.S. embassies here in the 1990s. This is all happening in the lead up to 2001, okay, 9/11, okay. And what we did in Somalia is, we left, not permanently, but we got out of there, okay. So that was 93. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but in February of 93, a van drove into the basement of the World Trade Center, in the parking lot underneath the World Trade Center that were brought down on 9/11. And a van filled with explosives blew up at the World Trade Center. Okay, so 9/11 was not the first time they tried to bring down the World Trade Center. Okay, we caught the guy that was the mastermind for this. Is the Blind Sheikh. Okay, and he sits in a prison in New York today. Okay, so that one killed 6 people and wounded over 1,000. Okay, when they tried to bring down the towers in '93. Okay, so as we move through the decade, okay, we changed presidents to Clinton. Okay, now this is domestic terrorism here. This is Oklahoma City, where they blew up the federal building there. That was Timothy McVeigh. You guys know that story? Any of you guys been to Oklahoma City, the memorial down there? Okay. And a lot of the prep for that attack actually took place in Kansas. So there's a trail of his, Timothy McVeigh's movements in Kansas to get the fertilizer, because the truck, it was like a rental truck, like a Ryder or a U-Haul truck, filled with nitrogen that they use for fertilizer. And he got that in Kansas and then parked it in front of the federal building in Oklahoma City, and obviously blew it up. This were the worst terrorist attacks in American history, and this one is domestic. Okay, 168 people were killed, including children that were in the daycare center on the first floor. Okay, over 600 were wounded. All right, then we moved back to Saudi Arabia. A car bomb in Riyadh, which is their capital, kills 7 people, 5 of them American military and civilian advisors. The Tigers of the Gulf Islamic Movement for Change and Fighting Advocates for God claim responsibility there. That's 95. And then a bomb aboard a fuel truck explodes outside the U.S. Air Force installation in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. 19 military personnel are killed in the Khobar Towers housing facility. 515 wounded, including 240 Americans. Again, we're in Saudi Arabia here. Now, these are some civilian, some military. We have Americans working over there in the oil industry and other industries and so forth. There's a movie on this loosely based on this called The Kingdom with Jamie Foxx. You guys know the black actor Jamie Foxx. It's a fabulous movie called The Kingdom. It's not the same as the one that's on Netflix right now, but one of my favorite movies out of the last 20 years, The Kingdom. Okay, and then you guys might have seen a movie about this. A pipe bomb explodes during the Olympic Games in Atlanta, killing one person, wounding 11. They arrested this guy Richard Jewell. And you guys see this movie? It came out just recently. Richard Jewell was a security guard, and he noticed a backpack. This is at the Atlanta, and he's kind of a slow guy. You know, he's not like, maybe doesn't have all of his faculties real good. You know, he's just, I don't know. He's slow. Well, the FBI thought he did it. Okay. In fact, because he spotted it, he saved a lot of people's lives. He's actually a hero, but they thought he was the one that did it. Okay. And then the news media got a hold of his name, totally destroyed this man's life and his family's life. They had his picture on the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Clint Eastwood made a movie about it just recently. It's a really sad story. And I don't think they ever found out who did it, okay, or what the reason for the attack was. Thankfully, it only killed one person, but it was a pipe bomb, okay? Rocket-propelled grenades hit the embassy near, U.S. embassy near Beirut. And then these are I talked about Kenya and Tanzania, U.S. embassies there, okay? 12 Americans are among 291 killed, over 5,000 wounded. These are massive explosions at the U.S. embassies, and they went off at the same time in those two countries, okay? One U.S. citizen wounded here among 10 killed and 77 injured in Nairobi, or in Tanzania, okay? Nairobi's in Kenya. In response, the United States attacked targets in Afghanistan and the Sudan with 75 cruise missiles fired from Navy ships. So this was our response, okay? We blew up some what we thought terrorist training camps in these two countries. So guys, this is 98. This is like, all right, if Al-Qaeda's not on your radar now, they better be on your radar, okay? Because they are going after Americans overseas, all right? And we're seeing suicide bombs. We're seeing, you know, this is obviously funded by somebody. Somebody's organizing this. We need to be paying attention, okay? So in 2000, we get a new president. Well, actually, not yet. This is still Clinton, because Bush won't take office until January 20th of 2021, okay? Or 2001, excuse me. So this is the USS Cole. This is a destroyer, one of our ships that goes into the port of Yemen. And like a rubber dinghy boat with a motor on it starts zooming up next to our ship. It's like refueling, okay, our ship, our destroyer. And this dinghy comes speeding up to our destroyer and explodes. It blows a hole in the USS Cole about the size of this classroom, all right? And it kills 17 sailors, injuring 39. In all these responses, guys, we left. We didn't, we closed our embassies in Kenya, in Tanzania. We left Somalia. We're going to leave Yemen. We're going to pull out of there. Okay, same thing in Beirut. All right. And so this is, as Clinton's leaving office, Bush comes in, and then on September 11, 2001, you get 9/11. Okay, and there were 19 hijackers. There were 4 planes hijacked. They were all leaving New York or Boston, and they were rerouted to strike civilian targets in the Pentagon. The 4th plane, United Flight 93. You guys know about Flight 93? They talk about that's the one that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And that one was brought down probably because the passengers knew what was going to happen. Guys, cell phones were being used. People were talking to their loved ones on the ground, and their loved ones were telling them what was going on the ground. And so they knew that since their plane had been hijacked, that it was probably going to be flown into a building somewhere. It is thought that was going to be the U.S. Capitol. Okay, and so the passengers tried to take the airplane back, and in the process, the plane went down in an open field. So nobody on the ground was killed. So really, the people on Flight 93 are heroes. They saved a lot of lives on the ground. So in response to that, obviously, we're going to go to war in Afghanistan, okay? And, you know, it's a complicated situation in Afghanistan, all right? So if I come back over here, okay, one of the most pressing problems is the terrain, okay? These are all mountains up here, okay? And I mean, really the whole country is kind of mountainous, desert, and so forth. So there's a movie that came out recently called 12 Strong. And you guys see this? Okay. This is about the first troops that went into Afghanistan. Now, one of the problems is staging areas in order to get troops into Afghanistan. There's a problem here. Okay. Obviously, we're an enemy of Iran. They're not going to let us put troops in Iran. These other countries up here, we don't have great relationships with, but they don't want to open themselves up to attacks. Okay, so we're having to fly troops in and fly supplies in. There's a group called the Northern Alliance. Okay, because I mentioned this group called the Taliban. The Taliban is the radicals, okay, and they're the ones that allowed Al Qaeda and Bin Laden to set up camp in Afghanistan. Okay, so there's a group called the Northern Alliance that has been fighting against the Taliban ever since they took over when the Soviets left in 1989. Okay, and so this group here, if you watch the movie 12 Strong, they're the ones that are going to help the Americans there, the first Americans. The first Americans there are actually CIA. Okay, and they're trying to figure out where Bin Laden is. They're hunting now the most wanted man in the world, Osama bin Laden. Okay, and Bin Laden is going to disappear. Now, these mountains here of Tora Bora and so forth are very easy to hide. So our troops are literally on horseback. You can't take Humvees up into the mountains. Okay, and you've got to have mules and so forth to carry supplies for the troops. And so that's what you'll see if you watch the movie 12 Strong. Okay. Over time, we start to decimate Al Qaeda, their training camps and so forth. Okay. They're on the run. Okay. Bin Laden disappears. We can't find him. And this goes through 8 years of Bush's presidency. We can't find Bin Laden. Okay. So we go to war here. And as far as Al Qaeda, the enemy that attacked us, that was, you know, we did a number on. Okay, but the thing these people can do is come into Pakistan. Okay, and what the Taliban does is they come back into Pakistan during the wintertime. And when the spring comes, they go back into Afghanistan and hunt Americans. Okay, and so we have been there since 2001. In the last 4 years or so, we've really been trying to train the Afghan National Army and the Afghan police to, you know, protect their government and set up a safe society. Okay, that's really what our goal has been the last few years, is to train them so they can stand on their own 2 feet. Okay, so any attacks on the Taliban right now are being conducted by the Afghan military with the help of American troops from the sky, whether it be satellites, you know, planning, artillery, maybe air cover. That sort of stuff's coming from the Americans helping the Afghans against the Taliban. Now, President Trump tried to get like a ceasefire with the Taliban, bring them to the peace table. The problem we have here, guys, is if we leave Afghanistan totally, okay, and this is a tough question, right? and I'm not saying there's a right answer, because I don't know what the right answer is, okay? But I can tell you the situation we're in. If we leave Afghanistan to themselves, just like get out of it, bring everybody out, will the Taliban take back over? And then open the door again for terrorist training groups to set up shop in Afghanistan. That's the fear. And all the people, the Afghan National Army, the Afghan police, all the people that helped the Americans in other countries that were fighting there will become targets of the Taliban. They will be hunted down and they will be murdered. This is what happened when we left Vietnam, guys. When we left Vietnam in 1975, anybody that served in the South Vietnamese Army, anybody that worked with the Americans, they were hunted down by the communists. You understand? So if we leave them too soon before they can stand on their own 2 feet, then we're just inviting the whole thing to start over again. So I don't know what the right answer is. Do we stay in Afghanistan or do we leave? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Why haven't we had authorization weapons against the Taliban?
Like nuclear weapons?
Nuclear, gas, or biological?
Because it's prevented by the Geneva Convention.
Surprised somebody still hasn't tried it yet, though.
Yeah, but what are you going to do? Just drop a nuke on a mountain somewhere? It's tough because they're intermingled with the population. The Taliban doesn't wear a uniform. So you don't know who's good and who's bad.
There isn't a population.
What's that?
If there isn't a population, then there isn't going to be Taliban.
True. Same. Get a grip. Okay?
No, this is like an absolutely terrible thing.
Yes, it is. Okay? All right. So while we're doing our thing in Afghanistan, in 2003, speaking of weapons of mass destruction, we are going to, President Bush is going to make the case, this is W. Bush, the son, is going to make the case that we need to remove Saddam Hussein from Iraq. Okay? After we kicked him out of Kuwait, the United Nations put all types of limits on what he could do. They said he can only sell oil for food. Okay? And there was a no-fly zone across the middle of Iraq that the Iraqis could not use the airspace. Okay, Baghdad is in here, okay, the capital. And so there was a no-fly zone that was patrolled by Americans and others here, and we really tried to tamp down on Hussein so he wouldn't go on the warpath again, okay? Well, for 11 years, he violated many of these restrictions against him by the UN, okay? And then the Bush team started making the case that he was working with Al-Qaeda that had attacked us on 9/11 and that they were creating weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, okay? He asked for permission from Congress to send troops and get rid of Saddam Hussein. Congress approved. There was no declaration of war. I will tell you this, guys, in 2003, most Americans supported this. Okay? So we go to war. And our troops go in, we take Baghdad. Okay? Now, what happens here is eventually we will find Saddam Hussein in what's called a spider hole. He's running, he's on the run. Okay? Spider hole is a small hole in the ground that opens up to a bigger room. Okay? And it took months, but they found him. And then he was put on trial by the Iraqi people, okay? And he was sentenced to death. And he was executed. They had democratic elections in Iraq for the first time in more than a century. It was kind of cool. So what we were doing was trying to democratize this country in the heart of the Middle East. And most people thought, hey, this is a good thing. We're going to have a friend in the Middle East. It'll be Iraq. We'll have military bases there, and we'll be able to create a situation where we can try and keep peace in the Middle East. Okay? Now, by 2006, guys, Now, remember, let me go back. Remember when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan? Does anybody remember the name of the group of the people that came from all over the Middle East to fight against the Soviets? What was the name of that group? The Mujahideen. Remember that? Mujahideen, and we gave the Mujahideen weapons. You guys remember this? Okay, now, guess what's going to happen in Iraq? When the Americans go to fight here, people from all over the Middle East come to Iraq to kill Americans. So we defeated Saddam's army, you understand? And quite quickly. But most of those soldiers just took off their uniforms and fled back into civilian clothes. And then you had people coming from Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, all over the place, coming to kill Americans. This was called the insurgency. Okay, and by 2007, what looked like a victory is now turning into a bloodbath. They're using IEDs, improvised explosive devices, roadside bombs to kill Americans, suicide bombers to kill Americans. So the general in charge is a guy named General David Petraeus. He wrote the book on counterinsurgency, how to defeat an insurgency, and then started to implement it. Now, one of the problems we had in both of these wars simultaneously is our rules of engagement for our soldiers. Okay? Only American women soldiers could search female suspects. Okay? Now, you guys know most of the women over there are wearing a burqa, right? So what's underneath the burqa? You don't know who an enemy is. You don't know who a friend is. Because nobody's wearing a military uniform over there. You understand? So you can only fire on an insurgent if the insurgent is firing on you. There's no night searches. So that these people know they can move at night. Okay? And they won't be searched at night. So our rules of engagement for our troops were really limiting how our troops could conduct this counterinsurgency. In 2007, Bush asked for a surge. He wanted 25,000 more troops to get rid of the insurgency here, change the tactics. Okay, so 2008, we've got a presidential election. The war has now become political. Okay, Barack Obama runs for president in 2008 saying he will pull all troops out of Iraq, not Afghanistan. Iraq did not attack us. You understand? And when we got there, we really didn't find any weapons of mass destruction. We knew they had some because we gave them to them back in the 80s when they were fighting against Iran. Remember, I told you we gave them sarin gas, which violated the Geneva Convention. Okay? So the war is very unpopular now. Okay? And Obama runs that we're going to pull troops out. And guys, with the surge and change in tactics, things had improved by 2008. Things had gotten better. Okay? But Obama kept his campaign promise. Okay? So by 2009, he starts pulling out all of our troops. Okay? That's what we elected. That's what we voted for as a nation. Okay? The problem is that as we pull our troops out of Iraq in 2009, let me zoom in on this a little bit without getting there. Okay. So we pulled troops out by 2009. Iraq is not ready to stand on its own 2 feet. We've been trying to train their military. We've been trying to train their police and so forth. It's difficult. These people are not used to ruling themselves. They're used to being ruled. You understand? Okay? Now, Saddam Hussein was a piece of crap. Okay? He was a bad guy. He was a military dictator. But as a military dictator, what Saddam Hussein did was he kept the radical fundamentalists in his country under control. Now that he's gone, there's nobody to keep the country under control. And this is where you did ISIS. You guys remember hearing about ISIS? Okay, now, who are these people? Who are these ISIS members? Okay, this is the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Okay, ISIS. These are former Sunnis. These are Sunnis, Muslims. Okay, this is an important distinction. Okay, these are Sunni Muslims, and many of them are part of Saddam's former Ba'ath Party, his political party. Okay, and what they will do, it starts small, but they have a leader. His name's al-Baghdadi. He's the caliph of the caliphate, Baghdadi. Okay? So what ISIS will do, or the Islamic State, is they will attack the Iraqi military. Now, we left the Iraqi military, Humvees, tanks, artillery, all kinds of weapons we left for them to defend themselves. Okay? But as soon as ISIS engaged the Iraqi military, they turned tail and ran. ISIS captured American tanks, American Humvees, American guns, and artillery. And they started to expand their territory, both in Syria and Iraq. Okay? So ISIS began to grow. Now, if you were to compare ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which is worse? ISIS is worse than Al-Qaeda. Okay, this is bad. Okay, they are killing people. They are enslaving people. Any guys ever heard of the Yazidis in Iraq? Yazidis are a group of people that are not Muslim and they're not Christian. They're some type of hybrid. Okay, and then you have a lot of old Christians in Iraq. Okay, we're talking about the earliest Christians. They're descendants of the earliest Christians. I mean, we live in the United States of America. Our country's only like 230 years old. Okay, these Christians have been around for millennia. You understand? And so, under the Islamic law, if you read the Quran, okay, if you are a Christian and you submit to Muslims, they don't have to kill you, but they can enslave you. Now, if you pay a tax, if you have enough money, if you're a Christian, you can pay a tax and be allowed to live as well. Okay, so basically they started enslaving Christians, taking them as wives, okay, and butchering people, cutting off their heads, okay, destroying archaeological, architecture that's been around for thousands of years. They start destroying it, trying to destroy history. Now, if you read the Quran, it's like reading Mein Kampf, which was Hitler's playbook. It was Hitler's plan to attack Russia, to create living space for the German people. Okay, the Quran lays out the plan. If you want to know what ISIS's goal was, read the Quran. And the goal for ISIS is to bring Rome, the West, into a great battle in Syria, where this will usher in the end times. Okay, one final battle. This is what they were trying to create. Okay, this is the sixth caliphate in Muslim history. Okay, there's been other caliphates. If you go back and you listen to President Obama, he didn't call them ISIS. He called them ISIL. Okay, the Islamic State of Levant. So if you go back to earlier caliphates, what ISIS's goal was to create a one Middle East Islamic state that's controlled by religious leaders, by a caliph. One religious leader. Like if the Pope ruled all of Christian world, you understand? That's their goal. Okay? Now, at the time when this first started, Obama called them the JV. Okay? They were the JV. They weren't really a problem, but they were a problem. Okay. And to Obama's credit, he did send some troops back into Iraq to help the Iraqis fight against ISIS. Okay. Now, before I get too far in that, we got to talk about some other things. Okay. When President Obama became president, his first overseas trip was to Cairo. Where's Cairo? Where's Cairo? It's in Egypt. Okay. He goes to the university there at Cairo, and he gives a speech. It's really a good speech President Obama gave. But he talked about freedom. He talked about democracy. He talked about self-determination of the people in the Islamic world, in the Middle East. And what began, and I don't know if you've heard of this, is the Arab Spring. Okay? So what started to happen here was movements, and social media was really used here. Twitter was big, okay, to overthrow dictators so that people could choose their own destiny in the Middle East, okay? So we had overthrown one. We helped do that, right? We overthrew a dictator, okay? Now we have ISIS. Be careful what you wish for. This is what's going to happen. So over here in Egypt, in Tahrir Square, shortly, I'd say a few months after Obama's speech, there's massive protests in Tahrir Square in Cairo, where people are demanding the head of their dictator, a guy named Mubarak. Okay? So Mubarak, who is a friend to the United States, the Egyptian military and the U.S. military have a very good working relationship. Egypt had promised friendship with Israel, who is our biggest ally in the Middle East. The only democracy in the Middle East, Israel. That's where the Jews live, right? Okay? So we had a pretty good working relationship with this Mubarak guy. Now, he is a dictator, and he's not a good guy. Did he steal billions of dollars from his own people? Yes. Mubarak is old, he's sick, and eventually they're going to overthrow him. Okay? Now, Mubarak's dead. They're going to hold elections. Just like they did in Iraq, they're going to hold elections. Okay? Now, there's no political parties in Egypt. Do you understand? They haven't done this in a long, long time. They don't know how to rule themselves. So the most organized group in Egypt is a group called the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, many in America that study the Middle East refer to the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Zahra Howie, who is Al-Qaeda's number 2, bin Laden's number 2, is one of the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood. So they're the most organized. And guess what? One of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood gets elected to Egypt. Now, Egypt, guys, obviously, you know, the pyramids are there. There's a lot of tourism. There's a lot of Westerners that visit there. Women in Egypt can go to college, go to school. They can drive. They can wear blue jeans. They're Westernized. Well, that all begins to change under the Muslim Brotherhood. They're going backwards. Okay. Now, the army, the leaders in the army of Egypt said, we're not doing this. So they overthrow the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, based on our laws, we cannot recognize that new government. Okay? But what they do is they ban the Muslim Brotherhood. They call it a terrorist organization. And they hold new elections. And now Egypt is back in safe hands. Then there's Libya. Muammar Gaddafi was responsible for allowing the Pan Am flight that blew up over Scotland that killed all those Americans. Remember this Pan Am flight and Ronald Reagan blew up his house? We thought his daughter was inside. Okay. Gaddafi's still in charge in Libya. Now we have Hillary Clinton is now the Secretary of State. Barack Obama's president. There's people trying to overthrow Gaddafi. Okay? And so the U.S. Navy, we're not going to use our troops. The U.S. Navy is going to help these rebels overthrow Gaddafi. Now you can YouTube this, search it, and you can see the death of Gaddafi. He's killed by his own people in the streets. Now Gaddafi, guys, after 9/11 happened, after we were attacked on 9/11, Gaddafi had a change of heart. He said to President Bush and then later President Obama, he said, look, we don't want to be your enemy anymore. If you guys want to send in inspectors to make sure we're not building, weapons of mass destruction, that sort of thing, I want to come clean. I don't want to be your enemy. Because the Bush doctrine after 9/11 was this. You're either with us or you're against us. You're either for terrorism or you're against terrorism. And Gaddafi said, I want to be against terrorism. So he was trying to improve his relationship. But Clinton and Obama felt like it'd be a good thing for Gaddafi to be gone. He's gone. Okay? Then there's a civil war taking place here in Syria. This is the Arab Spring, guys. This is overthrowing dictators. Okay? In Syria, the dictator there is Assad. Now, Assad has a good relationship with Iran. Assad is a Shia. ISIS is Sunni. So as ISIS is fighting in Syria, we have a common enemy with Assad, who's an enemy. This is going to get strange. Okay? And I haven't even started talking about the Kurds yet. Okay? So, the moral of the story is here, guys. When you get rid of these dictators, what you get may be worse than what you have. Because these dictators kept the radicals in their country under control. You follow me? These fundamentalists kept them under control. Guys, Saddam Hussein, when he ruled over Iraq, never persecuted the Christians there. Never. Assad, there's a lot of Christians in Syria. Assad protected the Christians. The Christians are no threat to these dictators. The Christians just want to worship Jesus Christ and raise their families and make a living. They're not going to cause problems. They are a minority. They're not going to cause problems. They know that the governments would come down hard on them. So the Christians rarely cause any problems in these Muslim countries. And the dictators make sure that they're not persecuted. You follow me? There's a lot of Christians in Egypt too. Coptic Christians. Okay? So what happens, guys, when we get rid of these dictators, the crazies, the fundamentalists in these countries start coming to power and create groups like ISIS. Guys, right now, Libya is a failed state. That country is a disaster right now. Under Gaddafi, at least there was some type of rule of law. And it wasn't Muslim law. It was the dictator's law. Okay? So we start getting involved here in Syria. And Assad's, he's not going to go. You know what I mean? Obama said if he uses chemical or biological weapons, he crosses a red line. Guess what? Assad uses chemical weapons on his own people. Where did he get those chemical weapons? He got them from Iraq. Because when we invaded Iraq, what chemical weapons they had, they shipped them out of the country to Syria. Now, what's crazy here, guys, is you guys heard of Benghazi, what happened in Benghazi where the 4 Americans died? Now, that one's called 13 Hours, that movie. Okay, that was a big thing with Hillary Clinton. Okay, there's Tripoli and there's Benghazi. This is Tripoli, this is Benghazi. Okay, what we were doing here, and this is all secret, and I heard about it like 2 days after what happened at Benghazi, and that was 9/11. It was September 11th when that attack happened. Okay, what we were doing here, Gaddafi had a ton of weapons. And the CIA was in Libya, and they were shipping weapons to rebels in Syria to fight against Assad. That's why we were there. That's what we were doing. That's a dirty little secret nobody wants to talk about. Okay? So now we got a mess on our hands. All right? Now, ISIS continues to grow. Now, I've got to talk to you guys about the Kurds. There's a group of people that live in this region right here, northern Iraq, a little bit of Iran, and southeastern Turkey, called the Kurds. They are a people with no country. The Iraqis hate them, the Iranians hate them, the Turks hate them. Now, not all of the Kurds are good people, but the Kurds have been good to us. So when we went to Iraq the second time and the first time, the Kurds helped American troops here. Okay? The fighting force for the Kurds is called the Peshmerga. ISIS is trying to kill the Kurds. So listen to this. When we're fighting ISIS, guys, over here, once Obama sends troops back in, ISIS is fighting against the Iraqi military, the American military, the Kurds, and Syria. So all four of those groups are against these Sunni ISIS people. Okay? Now, Russia starts sending ships to Syria and create an air base in Syria. Now, Russia's involved in helping fight ISIS. You've got 5 different groups trying to destroy ISIS. And at the same time, we're supporting efforts to overthrow their dictator Assad. And I remember saying this in 2016, whether Hillary won, because Hillary was the Secretary of State in Obama's first term, not the second term. So Hillary hadn't been involved really much. So if Hillary won or Trump won, we could take a different tack toward Assad. And really, once Trump was elected, no longer was the goal of the United States to remove Assad. Because if you remove Assad, what you're going to get in Syria could be much worse than what you have. Because we learned our lesson from getting rid of this dictator, this dictator, this dictator, and what we got was much worse. That's the history of that, that's the lesson of the Iraq War. There's a reason these dictators were there. And that was to control the radicals in their own countries. Okay? And so that's the Arab Spring. And that takes us into 2016 with Trump. And Trump really makes this a target to go after ISIS. And yes, we're actually communicating with the Russians about, planes flying so we don't shoot at each other and so forth. And you've got people from all over the world coming and fighting with the Kurds, with the Peshmerga. You have European and American civilians that are going over to fight against ISIS. There was an entire Belgian biker gang that left Belgium and flew and fought with the Kurds here, the Peshmerga, against ISIS, because they were so horrible. What they were doing was so disgusting. Okay, so now by the time Trump leaves office here, ISIS has been decimated. Baghdadi is dead. But they are popping up in other places, ISIS is, okay? They're still a problem. They're still out there. So is Al-Qaeda. They're still out there. We have diminished their abilities. And this is something we have to keep watch on to this day. Okay? So, the biggest problem in the Middle East is Israel, okay, which is our ally. And most of these countries hate Israel. Okay, you have the Palestinians that view Israel as their homeland. You have the Jews that view it as their homeland. Okay, and of course, Jerusalem is the capital of 3 faiths: the Jewish faith, the Christian faith, and the Muslim faith. Okay, so it's so disputed. And because the Jews are there, there's a lot of countries that want to get rid of them. Most notably, this one. Okay, death to America, death to Israel. Okay, now we have economic sanctions on Iran today. President Obama did a deal with them, gave them back, because when they, so that kind of takes us to today, all right? And hopefully you have a better understanding about how we got to where we are, okay? Dang, Bill.